Hello, everyone. How are you? Just waiting to stream live on YouTube as well. Welcome if you're watching on Instagram live, or maybe if you're watching on the playback. And welcome to. How are you? Just waiting to. No, that's not going to work. Excuse me a moment while I sort that out. Hi, everyone. How are you? You'd have to excuse me today if you can hear people outside. There's some scaffolders working outside on the next door house, and so right. Anyway, I think I've got that sorted. If you are watching on YouTube, I might not be able to see your comments today. I will get this sorted. New technology, I'm afraid. So how are you all? I'm afraid I wasn't here last week. I'm sorry about that. That's because it was Jubilee. It was Jubilee celebrations, and actually last Thursday and Friday for most of the day was the only good weather we had. Excuse me, at least up here in the Midlands. Excuse me. Hi Jenna, how are you doing? Hello, my journalist. How are you? So there's a few things though I have been up to, which I will tell you about today. One of the reasons why I'm a little bit late getting my tech set up is because I've been interviewing. I've been interviewing this morning and yesterday, so I'll tell you about that, who I've been speaking to, and also where I went on the weekend. So anyway, yeah, I'm testing out Zoom on this. Anyway, we'll see. We shall see. Thank you, my journalist. That's my outfit. This is one of my favourite tops. I bought this to go on tour, actually, a few years ago. Can you hear them outside? I hope you can't, but at the same time, they sing. They they like to shout to each other rather than just talk. Anyway, before I get going, hi Ipsa 1959. How are you doing in Hamburg? Before we get going, I just want to say thank you to Diane. Diane has become a kind supporter. So on my Patreon, there is actually a lower tier where you can just support my work here on YouTube and Instagram, if you would like to. So thank you very much to Diane, who has done that. So let me tell you about what I've been up to then. Yesterday, I was speaking to a lady called Hazel Forsyth. She is a senior curator at the Museum of London. And I don't know if any of you have ever made it to the Museum of London, but it's hi, Phil, how are you doing? It's almost like a no, that probably sounds really bad, but it's specifically about London. So it almost has a provincial museum feel. And it talks about, or you can go through the story of London from before there was a settlement there, right through, Roman times. And there's a brilliant Tudor, 15th century and 16th century and 17th century rooms. Now, of course, the Great Fire of London occurs in 1666 in the city of London. And Hazel, one of her responsibilities is the room about the Great Fire of London. Now, the Museum of London, where she works, is going to be closing at the end of this year for 2 years, because it's going to move to a new site at Smithfield Market, which the building that was Smithfield Market is going to become the new museum. And disappointingly, the Great Fire of London story, I think this is disappointing. The Great Fire of London story is going to be very young children oriented. Like, it's going to be aimed at 6 to 7 year olds. I'm not completely sure why the Great Fire of London is a story that needs to be made for children. It's not a children's story. And my interview with Hazel yesterday was incredibly insightful. That will be coming out to patrons right at the end of August and out on YouTube at the beginning of September, to coincide with the anniversary of the Great Fire, which started on the 2nd of September. But the reason I say I don't think it's a children's story, one, I mean, it's a fire that wiped out 3/5, of a city, and displaced an incredible number of people, put a stop on people's businesses, livelihoods, ability to practice their faith. You know, they had to find new churches. There's something like 40, I can't remember how many parish churches were burnt, over 40. It's a harrowing, incredibly interesting story because of the bounce back. Some people is interesting what came back. But if you're interested, now this is what prompted me to want to interview Hazel. She wrote this book, if you can see it. It's called Butcher Baker, Candlestick Maker, Surviving the Great Fire of London. And she writes it by trade. So you actually get to understand the fire through the eyes of real people. Someone and their work, you know, is inextricably linked, especially in somewhere like London in 1666, where it is full of trades, particular trades, and people would take up a very specific trade, like really specific. So in the interview, she was explaining about like carriages, you know, as in horse-drawn carriages, all the components of a carriage. Each one would have someone specializing, or say someone, more than one person, of course, specializing in the creation of that particular part. So people and their trade, their profession, are inextricably linked. So she tells the story through what happens. There is a really, really, really good overview chapter at the beginning as well, just to give you an idea. Look, this map shows, you can see this better on YouTube, but you can see that the orange part is the extent of the fire. So that's all the buildings that were destroyed. So you have, if I can give you some perspective, so you have the Tower of London down here, and you can see just how close to the Tower of London the fire got. And this, of course, at the time is where the armories are, the gunpowder. So if the fire had reached there, then we'd have probably had a big hole here. You've got, so you go right up to Greyfriars somewhere. But yeah, so really, you can see how it's 3/4 of the city. And then up here, you've got some of the fields. More fields becomes really important afterwards as a temporary village, sort of a village of tents to begin with, and then almost sheds. And then, well, she explained, Hazel explained, some of these sheds could be 2, 3, even 4 stories high. I mean, that's a good shed. Who doesn't want a shed that could be 4 stories high? But as you can tell, so they're getting pretty permanent. And she talks about what happens and how there has to be regulation, but also people have to be reminded, you know what, you have got to go at some point. But yes, it is absolutely incredible how far it's spread. Now, you can see as well, it goes all the way along the line of the Thames. And this is where warehouses were. So you've got goods, commodities coming in and being traded out all across the world from here. Part of the reason why the fire takes off so much, like literally takes off. I'm not even joking. So barrels of flammable materials and are shot up into the air, and they're like projectiles, aren't they? Fire bombs. They're being projected. They're on fire. They land somewhere else, and the fire takes hold. The winds are really high, so that helps fan the flames. And yeah, it burns for 4 days. 4 days. So yeah, Genesis, thank goodness for the Thames. Yeah, so it does appear that the moat is still there at this time. But it's Doug wants a 4th floor shed. Like a 4th floor house, that'd be quite cool. Yeah, so you do have the moat. However, like I say, these projectiles, had anything blown the other way, then presumably, we could have had a fire at the Tower of London and the Tower of London be no more. Remember, St Paul's Cathedral is here, and people have taken books, documents. They think, well, this is a stone structure, this is going to survive, it will be fine. There's the churchyard, it's a natural fire break. You've got Paternoster Row nearby. Actually, you can still go to Paternoster Row. The road layout is really, really similar. So Paternoster Row still exists. Paternoster Row is where all your booksellers are, pamphleteers. They put all of their books in the crypt of St Paul's, and St Paul's does indeed burn to the ground. It has scaffolding on it because they were already going to be doing some work. So I don't know whether Wren had a little bit of a, ooh, I can start again. Rather than mess with the medieval church, I can build this. I've got in mind a dome. No, you can't have a dome. I'm sorry, it looks too much like St Peter's. Okay. And then he ends up building the dome anyway. That's a longer story, but anyway, so yeah. So check that out. So that won't be out till September. But so that is my interview with Hazel Forsyth, talking about the Great Fire of London, talking about the impact on the people, and who was considered to blame. Because I don't know if you know, but we all know Thomas Fariner starts in his bakery on Pudding Lane, and we all know that. Nothing comes to him in terms of blame. Nothing. There's a scapegoat created and hung, and he's blamed for it. So incredible. So it's a really, really interesting interview. Patrons, you'll get that at the end of August. Patrons were able to put their own questions to Hazel as well, which is what I do with all my guests. Patrons get to ask their own questions of them. So they will get that at the end of August, and then the main part of the interview will be available ready for the anniversary of the Great Fire. So that's 2nd of September. So that's one thing I've been doing. I do find the fire interesting, and we covered bits of it that I don't think are normally covered, because the concentration will be on how it started, and you get people like Pepys. I mean, we know a lot about the fire because of Pepys' diary, but you don't get so much about the psychological impact on people. We talked about how it would have been. Actually, what would you have been experiencing if you were in the city during the fire? Could you see? Probably not. What would you be hearing? The fact there's lots of animals in the city because everyone uses horses to draw carts, etc. So there's lots of elements that aren't normally touched upon, which we've touched upon in that interview. So but in the meantime, if you are interested in the Great Fire, I would thoroughly recommend Hazel's book, Butcher Baker Candlestick Maker, Surviving the Great Fire of London. It's really, really good, and I think you can get it on Amazon. I think I got my copy off Amazon, so I would recommend that. And then this morning I have been interviewing Elizabeth Norton, which many of you may know because she's written a lot on the Tudor period. She's written on the Queens of England, and she has so this might be a surprise, and this is what I have been talking to her about. Hi Brian, how you doing down there in Cornwall? Cornwall came up in my interview with Elizabeth this morning, because of course you've got the Britons that went to Cornwall, haven't you? We were talking about Anglo-Saxon England, because this is Elizabeth's book that you may not know much about. Sorry, my journalist, not sure how they'll turn this into a children's story. A lot of dumbing down shall occur. So anyone who's just joined us, I was talking about how the Museum of London are moving. Now, Hazel, who I interviewed yesterday, is a curator at the museum. In the new museum, when they open it, they're they're covering the Great Fire of London, but they're aiming it at 6 to 7 year olds. My personal opinion is why. You know, it's a very, very important story, and it's harrowing. It's it's not a children's story. It's not. That's my opinion. So yeah, I think dumbing down will have to occur. I agree. So today I spoke to Elizabeth Norton, and so like I say, you may know Elizabeth off the TV. She's been in lots of television series and documentaries on the Tudors, and in particular, she also is a consultant on many TV series and historical dramas. But little known fact, she's also written on the Anglo-Saxon period. Her original degree is in archaeology, a lot around Anglo-Saxons. Now, her book, if you see, is called Elfrida, the First Crown Queen of England. And if you were with me a couple of weeks ago, you'll know I mentioned how the Queen's name isn't Elfrida. This is an anglicised name and only used for the publication. And my opinion is we should stop dumbing down with names. They are hard. They are difficult, but Elfrida was not her name. And I just don't think there's an excuse for calling somebody something different because it's a bit difficult to say the name. I think that about now. I can't stand it if somebody says, oh, yeah, his name's such and such, but we call him Bob. Well, don't call him his name. Anyway, that's not what to do with what I'm saying now. So this is actually about Elfrith. She is the first queen of England that we'd think about as England, who has a coronation. Let me just have a sip of my tea. She's married to King Edgar, and they have a coronation ceremony at Bath. Bath, not as you would recognise it today. It was in ruin at the time, but you know, special spiritual place. You've got the springs. In fact, the springs still run there, and the Romans had a obviously there. Anyone who's been to Bath, you'll know it's famous for the baths, the Roman baths, and it's that hot spring that came up there that meant that the Romans sited a temple there, and so this coronation of Edgar and Elfrith takes place in Bath because of those Roman links. This is an imperial coronation, or it's supposed to invoke the idea of him being an emperor. Yeah, he's king of the English, but he's also overlord of the Welsh and the Cornish and anyone else that you can manage. So you've got the Strathclyde and the Scots as well. Mad Jonas, she had such a pretty name. She did. But as Elizabeth was explaining in the interview, most of you will probably have heard about Queen Emma. Emma was the daughter-in-law of Elfrith. She is the one who married Ethelred the Unready, or Uncounselled, and she then married his successor Knut, who's a Viking. Now she is Emma of Normandy, but Emma was so her Norman name. So they renamed her when she came to England. Edgar, I think. I'd have to check. So Emma was a weird name to the Anglo-Saxons. But yeah, so I mean, she's got this book. So if you wanted to read about Elfrith, it's a perfectly digestible book. And what we also did was go into not only Elfrith's role as queen, because what was very interesting, I mean, I should leave this for you to watch the interview, but anyway, you're here, so here we go, is that being a wife of a king did not, in Anglo-Saxon times, make you automatically a queen. And kings would have multiple wives, often, not at the same time. They were serial monogamists. So they would divorce and remarry and so they may have children with more than one wife. If one of those wives is created queen, her offspring automatically go up in status above their half siblings, whether they are older or not. And we're talking about boys mainly. It really wasn't actually seemed to be tested that often. There was plenty of male heirs around. So that was really interesting. And her role at the time, in terms of in the monastic reformation, which was going on at the time, was pivotal. She was a big supporter of. There was three bishops actually. St Dunstan. It became St Dunstan. So Dunstan, Oswald, and Ethelwald, and they were, especially Dunstan and really purely Ethelwald in terms of his approach to it. We're going to re-establish monasteries, because the Vikings have pretty much managed to wipe out a lot of them, the monasteries which had been set up in sort of the previous centuries. So Dunstan and Ethelwald's idea was they were going to build back better, bring monasteries back again. Sorry, I'm laughing because it's like, I've heard this before multiple times. So their idea was, right, we're bringing back the monasteries. We're any that have been sort of left to ruin and have struggled after being raided by Vikings multiple times. We're going to build those again, and we're going to build new ones. And they did. There's a lot of political wrangling at this point, because in order to do that, if you're going to award a monastery land so that it can build it back, or you're going to create a new monastery, where's that land come from? Well, it comes from other people. It is taken from other people and given to the monasteries. Jenna, bring them back just to have them destroyed again. Indeed. Yeah, build them back, Colleen says. Really, the monastic movement that comes out of the end of the 10th century, which Elfrith is pivotal. She basically becomes the head of all the nunneries, so not the monasteries with the men, but the nunneries, and she's a big supporter of this Reformation, and it brings in the rule of Benedict as the key rule, and it's very strict. Any secular clerks are they're just told to leave. No, sorry, you have no job anymore, you have no roof over your head, sorry, go. Probably not even sorry. So it was brutal. This is not the form of monasticism. Oh, look at this nice little valley next to a river, and we can farm some sheep here and maybe grow some corn, and then we'll just build this little church. This little church gets bigger and bigger. It's not quite as romantic as that in this period. But yeah, what they built survived pretty much in attitude, approach, and the physical buildings until our good old friend Henry came along. Now, what's really interesting as well, and there's loads of it, honestly, you will love the interview. Elizabeth didn't love it quite so much because I forgot to press record for the first rather large bit. We had to do it again, but anyway, it is very, very good. And so obviously Elizabeth does Anglo-Saxons, and mainly known for Tudors. I know a lot of you like the Tudors. So think about this. So Edgar, so Ethelfrith's husband, becomes head of the monasteries under this Reformation. Elfrith becomes head of the nunneries. You have your secular rulers overseeing the church. By the time we get to Magna Carta in 1215, it is firmly established that every time a charter is created, produced by a king, usually on their accession to the throne, but in Magna Carta's case, to whack King John over the head with, the first clause, it is to maintain the independence of the church from the king, from the monarch. And yet, at the end of the 10th century, we've got them being awarded the headship of the church. So, and then when we get to Henry literally destroys it at the same time as putting those roles back together. So he's destroying the physical elements of it, but bringing back the role, the roles together. So I thought that was quite fascinating, and also how much the queens knew about each other. So you have queens going into the first part of the Norman era, who either knew personally some of their predecessors, or through the telling of stories and oral history would have known about other queens, right back to Elfrith. So it's a really fascinating interview. It's going to be out later this month. In fact, only it will go to patrons next week, and everyone else the week after. So you'll be able to see it on YouTube whenever that would be, around about the 20th, something like that, of June. Keep an eye out on my Instagram story, and obviously keep an eye out on YouTube to see it. And yeah, you'll be able to see it. So anyone who's a patron, you'll get the extended interview, which has all of your questions that you put to Elizabeth answered, and they are on the extended interview. Everyone else, you get the main bulk of the interview. So it's really interesting. Honestly, has anyone watched Last Kingdom or any kind of Anglo-Saxon based drama? Because I actually think it's quite useful. And I spoke to Elizabeth about this because she's so any of you have been following me for a little while, and you saw me go live from Deerhurst, which was important in the Anglo-Saxon era as well. Yeah, so you'll know that I was watching The Last Kingdom, but it's incredibly useful when you don't know much about an era to be able to, well, not only in this particular period, listen to the names be spoken over and over again, because they are difficult. Clearly the language at the time was much different. I don't know how to explain it, but they clearly use different sounds, and their mouths would have been different, form different sounds. So it's good to hear the names be said over and over again, but also to be able to imagine, I know they're actors, but almost put a face to a name, which I think is quite helpful. So I'd recommend Last Kingdom, as you know. So that's the two interviews that I've been doing. So Elizabeth Norton's interview will be out for patrons next week, everyone else the week after. Jenna says, yeah, these shows come in handy for sure. They really do, don't they? I think they do. Especially with I mean, obviously The Last Kingdom only covers a particular time period, and it's not really that long because it's supposed to be the lifetime of one man, who doesn't seem to age when everyone else around him does. But anyway, that's the fictional part for you. In fact, he's fictional, but it's an incredibly complex era in that it's not linear. We don't get the formation of England, the adoption of Christianity, the building of monasteries like we've spoken about. You don't get that in a linear fashion. It doesn't build in a linear way. It's very much toing and froing. You've got to remember as well, the Vikings, the Vikings begin invading to pilfer and go away in sort of the 7th century, I think it is. By the I don't know, don't quote me, 8th maybe, they're starting to settle. They want to conquer. By Ethelred's reign, who's the son of Elfrith. So this goes from the 10th into the 11th century. By that point, England's clearly rich because they keep being paid off, so they may as well just come here. And settle. So it could, history could have gone a very different way from that point of view as well in the end. That's quite interesting. Ethelred's reign is interesting for what he tries to do with the Vikings. Sort of, he can't fight them. His army isn't strong enough, so he decides to pay them off. And what he thinks might be a good idea is instead of them coming and him having to pay them off every time, is he says, why don't you provide a standing army and I will pay them and they will be fed and housed. And he pays for this by effectively taxing the people who probably would have lost their property to the Vikings, potentially in raids. And so they're paying taxes to pay for this standing army. And Ethelred thinks he's got it sussed. Anyway, it doesn't last. The the standing army decide they're a little bit bored and start going marauding anyway. So relationships break down, and the native people are not very happy that they're not only paying taxes, but they're still getting attacked anyway. And a lot of the Viking army flee. They go back to Normandy or wherever they have been and want to go back to. Normandy, remember, is friendly to the Vikings. They are Norsemen. They're Northmen. So there's the links. And those that are left, Ethelred gives the order for them to be murdered, wiped out. I'm not clear whether that's the rest of the standing army and some other people were caught up in that, or whether it appears more to be that than every sort of Scandinavian still here. So, but they get slaughtered on St. Brice's Day, which was a festival that they would have observed, and it's called the St. Brice's Day Massacre. You can Google it, look it up, and that's not a great idea, because every Viking everywhere hears about this. They not only hear about it, they have kin who were still here, and were murdered, and so it just leads on to more upheaval, raids, and fights. So Anglo-Saxon, honestly, incredible. Read Mark Morris's book, The Anglo-Saxons. There's also one that I can't think of at the moment, just called The Anglo-Saxons. Hi Philippa, and Anita, how are you doing? Yeah, because it's fascinating. It's like 7.5 centuries, something like that. So this is the period, obviously, the Romans leave before the Norman conquest, but often overlooked because it is complicated. The names are complicated. You will find that different geographical locations are more important then than they are now. So you'll hear lots of talk of Winchester, of course, which you've probably heard about, which was the old capital of Wessex, and Wessex became the dominant kingdom in England. So Wessex became very important. Hi, Melissa, how you doing? But you'll also hear about places like Malmesbury, Glastonbury, the abbey, not the farm. So anyway, I'm going on a bit now about Anglo-Saxons, but it's I think it's very interesting. Right, sorry, I am just popping into my YouTube comments to see who's there. Hiya, John. Oh, you've got Hazel's book. Well done. So John has, it's a big book, isn't it? But it has ordered Hazel's book. So anyone who's just joined me, this lady, Hazel Forsyth, I interviewed her yesterday about the Great Fire of London. And this is a really good book if you want a book on the Great Fire of London, because she goes through by trade. Now, incredibly, John, you'll appreciate this when you look at this book. She incredibly researched it from primary sources and wrote it in 6 months. That's how long she had to do it. And she did it, used every spare waking hour that potentially she probably should have been asleep to write it. And it's brilliant. Good morning, Marianne. How you doing? Yeah, Catherine. Proper man shed, the 4-story one. Yep, absolutely. Uhtred, son of Uhtred in the Last Kingdom. Just watch him for him. Hello, Bobby Ann, how you doing? Hello, and Tara. Pete's feet. Do you do a lot with your feet? So it's been a good week for interviewing. So, like I said, my interview with Elizabeth Norton will be out for patrons next week, everyone else the week after, and the one on the Great Fire of London with Hazel will be out end of August for patrons and beginning of September for everyone else. So that'll be live on YouTube. Colleen, destiny is all. Honestly, everyone, if you haven't watched it, you really have to. Otherwise, we're just going to keep coming out. We're going to be those really irritating people that come out with lines from things that you should know. Mad Journalist, I also adore the Anglo-Saxon period. I feel I've not read up on it nearly enough or as much as I have on the Tudor era, and I feel not enough resources are readily available on the Anglo-Saxons either. So Elizabeth talks about how, in fact, John, you put a question to her, so it was your question I put to her about, hi Maria, how are you doing? About sources. And one thing she said was, at least in the Anglo-Saxon period, well, it's a sort of double-edged sword, you can read all of them. You haven't got a chance of getting through all the sources that are available for Tudor England, as an example. There's too many. You'll never be able to do it. Whereas you can read all of the sources in Anglo-Saxon England. But yeah, I can't tell you which book it is because it's on my Audible on my phone. But Mark Morris, his book about the Anglo-Saxons, is really good. Geoffrey Hindley, I think the other one is by. And yeah, the challenge with it is, like I say, it's a big long period of 7 or 8 centuries, and it's not linear. So there's a lot to. So even the formation of England, it's not one place. Let me just. Sorry, I've just realised someone's doing something dodgy on my YouTube, so I'll just take them off. Excuse me a moment. Yeah, it's not just right, good, got rid of them. Yeah, it's not just that it's such a long period, but so yeah, sorry, I know what I was saying. So like we know Wessex becomes dominant, but Mercia, the Kingdom of Mercia, which you won't find the word Mercia on any maps. I live in Mercia, what would have been Mercia. You get it on, well, you get it in the name of the police force. You get it in the name of some an army regiment. Someone will be able to tell me. But you might hear of the Mercian Way, which is a footpath, but you don't really hear it. Anyway, Mercia was a massive kingdom, but they take land. They break. So the borders are constantly changing. The Vikings will come in. So you may have heard of Danelaw, which was the area of England controlled by Danes who had come and settled. But that wasn't one kind of coordinated effort. There's lots of little kingdoms, and in fact, perhaps if the Danes had been more coordinated, more of one force as opposed to many little ones who then kind of had a bit of a fought with each other as well, perhaps that would have been a more successful invasion, and maybe William the Conqueror wouldn't have happened, which is an interesting idea. So but yeah, so don't let it put you off. Yeah, my journalist, few. It is that few. It is kind of sad. So the other thing Elizabeth was saying was you've got to rely on archaeology as well. So there's probably enough to go at, especially as amateurs, like we are. So I think, but yeah, gonna start with the Last Kingdom. There's some great videos as well on YouTube where people have drawn the maps and shown how things have gone. The borders have gone that way and come back, and very dependent on who was in charge, who's the ruler at the time. How good were they at strategy, diplomacy, just getting in the dirt and fighting? How good were they? Had a big impact. So yeah, so fascinating. So I'm doing any of you who are patrons, you'll know that last quarter I do a quarterly event for nobility and above, and I did an introduction to Anglo-Saxon England in Patreon. So if you're interested and you think you'd like to see that, then you can come and join Patreon. I did a quick visit on Sunday. I'm hopefully going somewhere tomorrow as well, but I'll keep that under my hat in case I don't get to go. But Sunday, like I said, we had the Jubilee last week. The only good weather we had was Thursday-ish, but it was good. It got better Friday morning, and then it rained. And by Sunday, I felt so I had cabin fever. I had to get out. And there's a place that actually is only about 3/4 of an hour, 45 minutes from me, that I haven't been to yet, or hadn't been to. And it is it has Tudor origins. In fact, it goes back beyond that, but the building that's there now has Tudor origins. And it's this place. It's called Coughton Court. And I'll say that while you look at it, Coughton. So not Coughton or Cogton, Coughton. You don't say the G or the T. So there you go, Coughton Court. So this is where I went. This is the only Tudor part, this bit that remains. And this is now sort of the reception area as you go in, if you like, where they meet and greet you. That would have been open completely, and that would have gone back into the courtyard behind. I'll have a good day, my journalist. Thank you for joining me. And Coughton has big links to, well, it's the Throckmorton, I should say, the seat of the Throckmorton family, who you will probably recognise the name of, even if you're not quite sure why. And they were a influential, wealthy Catholic family, which is fine, of course, until the reign of Edward and then Elizabeth. Now, in Elizabeth's reign, the Throckmortons get caught up in plots to put Mary Queen of Scots on the throne. You may have also heard about Bess Throckmorton, who was married to Sir Walter Raleigh. How did I say it? So there you go. Who possibly carried his head around in a bag for the rest of her life. Hello, Laurie. How are you doing? Goochland, start again. Goochland County, Virginia. Lots of British history here. Oh yeah, well, Virginia. So named after our Virgin Queen Elizabeth. It just shows, though, doesn't it, how far back? Like people say, oh, like you've got lots of history clearly, which is good. I mean, here it is just. I'm incredibly lucky. Where I live, actually not where I actually live. I'll have a bit of a moan about that in a minute, because I live in probably one of the oldest towns in which you will find nothing old. They've managed to obliterate pretty much everything. So, Goochland is from Sir William Gooch. I would have to look him up, Laurie. Tell me about him. Yeah, so anyway, where was I? So Coughton Court, the Throckmortons. Oh, the other massive massive plot the Throckmortons are involved in is the Gunpowder Plot at the beginning of James I's reign. The plot designed to take out the king and the heir to the throne. We would have had Charles I as a boy king, had that have succeeded in terms of the bombing and not succeeded in terms of the plot. But yeah, so they live here now. Of course, if you're a Catholic family in Elizabethan England, you're going to have trouble practicing your faith. You're going to have trouble getting a priest. They're outlawed. You're not allowed. They're not even allowed to step foot on English soil. If you're found harboring a priest, it's the death penalty. If you are a priest, it's most certainly a death penalty. So hearing mass, which Catholics would need to do on a daily basis, was dangerous. It was dangerous. And so many of the houses of people who could afford it basically would have priest hides. We've spoken about priest hides on this channel before, and we've been talking about Harvington Hall. And there are priest hides at Coughton Court as well. Unfortunately, as there's still a bit of a hangover from the pandemic, volunteers at these kind of places are still few and far between. And so they hadn't opened the rooms that have the priest hides off them. But the priest hides that are built here were built by a man called Nicholas Owen, who I've since found out is one of the 40 English martyrs. And he is also responsible for the priest hides at Harvington Hall, because we're talking about a similar area here. Harvington Hall, Hindlip Hall, which is gone, and probably many other of the Catholic houses around here. Travis, how are you? Love seeing homes with, I'm presuming you're Travis, King Trav the 8th. I love seeing homes with the priest holes. They're so interesting. They really are. What is fascinating, so I don't know what, I actually only know about Nicholas Owen, and I've bought another book on him. Let me show you. I've got another book that I must read. And so he is particularly famous. He was taken to the Tower, and I think he died on the rack, which is pretty horrendous. His designs, though, famously are never repeated. He never repeated the same design again, so that should priest hunters find a hide, they can't go looking for the same idea anywhere else. So it's incredibly skillful what he was doing in the first place, building these hides so that you couldn't tell from the outside or the inside that there was this space that that was created for putting a person or the accoutrements of the mass in. So he but not only was he an incredible engineer, architect, builder, in being able to build those, he had to think of a different way of doing it every single time. So the ingenuity and the imagination that he had is quite incredible, isn't it? Trav, you are Travis. That's okay. So I realised I just assumed Travis. My IG name is modelled off Henry VIII. I like it. Excellent. Yeah, cool. So I went to Coughton Court. It was nice. I had a cream tea. Don't know if you saw my Instagram post about the correct way to do it. You may or may not care. Most people care about which comes first, cream or jam. They care a lot. So so it was really interesting. So I said, so this would have been the entrance way. So you literally, it was just open right through to the back. So your horses and your carts and carriages would go through there. In the 17th century, I think it was, the owners decided to close it up and create a room, and they created a fan vaulting. sure if you can see there, that's obviously looking straight up into it. And it looks like stone, and it's not, it's plaster, I think. Yeah, plaster, painted to look like stone. Now, the Throckmortons still live there. So it was donated to the National Trust in the 40s, I think, 1940s. And yeah, on the proviso that the family could remain there. So they do use all the rooms that you see, they still do use, plus they have an entire wing, which would have been, so the way the court was built, where the building was built, you had a entertainment side, so with the great hall and with drawing rooms and things like that, and then you had a sort of domestic side where all the bedrooms were, so the family remain there and then they come and use the rest of the building as and when. So you are going through a living, breathing part of history when you go. So that wasn't bad, was it, for a just Sunday pop out because I was feeling a bit hemmed in with the wet rain. We're not getting a good summer here. I want it to better brighten up, ready for my tour in July, 18th of July. We're doing the Life and Times of Elizabeth I. Harvington Hall is on that itinerary. So great place for looking at priest hides. So yeah, but no, at the moment it's not doing much. Right, so what else have we been up to? History After Dark. Anybody join? We did it on a Monday, which didn't seem to throw people. We got loads of people joining us. We were talking about Tudor dinner party. So if you missed that, we were talking about, in fact, this was Tudor Ghost Mummy's suggestion, Rebecca. So thank you for this. 6 people at a Tudor dinner party. Who would you choose? No monarchs. And we went through all our candidates. We ended up with a lot, I don't know, 15, 16. We had to whittle it down to 6. Who would we have at the dinner party? So if you want to check out that conversation, if you go to history.after.dark on Instagram, then you will be able to see that conversation. And John says the Tudor dinner party was amazing. I'm glad you think so. It was fun. I quite enjoyed doing that on a Monday night as well. Bobby says it was fun as well. Yeah, I quite like doing it on a Monday. So maybe I can persuade the girls if everyone else is up for a Monday. We may also move it to YouTube. So we shall see. That's a potential as well. So, but anyway, we will let you know in good time if that's what is going to happen. So that was History After Dark. Tomorrow we've got Visiting Tudor Britain at 4:00, posted on Deb Royal's channel, so at Tudor Times. I'll check if that's underscore. Oh, I know what. Oh, have I got it to show you? Yes, I have. So Deb Royal, who I do Visiting Tudor Britain with, and alongside her and Sarah Morris, the Tudor Travel Guide, on a Friday at 4:00. We rotate who's hosting. But Deb has created a new magazine, and I know a few of you have subscribed, but if you haven't, this is the first issue. It's called Tudor Places. You can follow Tudor Places on Instagram as well. Tudor_places. So I think it's Tudor_times is Deb's other one. And it's full of basically Tudor places. We've got a article on Anne Boleyn's apartments in the Tower of London. Sarah has done a whole piece on visiting, was it Suffolk? I might have that wrong. Yeah, no, I have got it right. Tudor Suffolk. And Cassidy Cash has got a lovely drawing there. Oh, Ipsa says, are you allowed to curse on YouTube? I don't think we're really allowed to curse on Instagram. But apparently people are having a bit of trouble sometimes getting their comments on. Just leave us be. Leave us be. Or talk dirty. I don't know, surely there's plenty of stuff on YouTube though, isn't there? I'd be really disappointed. Oh, would I be disappointed or proud if we managed to ping the censors? With the amount of other stuff that's on there, I don't know. It's a very good question. Almost makes me tempted to just try it. Yeah, so we'll see. But anyway, so yeah, Tudor Places. I'll just mention it because that came through the post the other day. And if you're a patron, you get 10% off your subscription, or you can buy them as one-off issues as well. So another reason to become a patron. And if you want to, you would be more than welcome. I know a few of you already are. Patreon.com/British History. And we have a lovely little community over there. And it's all stuff that you won't see elsewhere. So there you go. We are coming up to the hour, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. All being well, I will be back this time next week for Thursday Tea Time History Chat live, 1 o'clock, streaming on Instagram and on YouTube. So in the meantime, should I say, have a fabulous week. And I will see you all very soon. In fact, I'll see you tomorrow if you're coming to visit in Tudor Britain. All right. See you all soon. Bye-bye.